What if I told you that General Motors, perhaps without meaning to, built two small block engines so perfectly matched in performance that they ended up competing with each other for decades? And instead of celebrating both, GM actively worked to hold them back because one wasn't even an official factory product and the other threatened to make their big block lineup look outdated. This is the untold battle between the Chevrolet 383 Stroker and the 400 small block, a rivalry that reveals one of GM's most awkward engineering secrets. It all started in the early 1970s, a time when GM made one of the most puzzling decisions in its history. On one hand, they allowed a certain engine combination to exist in the enthusiast community, while on the other, they quietly undermined an official production engine that could have rewritten their performance playbook. The 383 Stroker came to life not from GM's own marketing department, but from the ingenuity of hot rodders. By pairing a 350 small block with a 400 crankshaft, backyard builders stumbled onto a displacement formula that many engineers believed was mathematically ideal for a small block's power output. The results were so good that GM's own internal calculations confirmed its efficiency. But there was a problem. This perfect engine wasn't part of GM's official catalog, and corporate leaders were uneasy with the idea that customers had out-engineered them using factory parts. Meanwhile, the 400 small block was GM's sanctioned answer to Ford's growing influence in the small block market. Built to deliver big block torque in a lighter, more efficient package, the 400 was designed with a larger bore and stroke that promised exceptional torque without sacrificing fuel economy, an increasingly important factor under tightening emissions rules. Engineers knew they had something special, but what they didn't expect was that this factory-built engine's performance potential would mirror that of the home-built 383. In internal testing, the two power plants reached similar performance levels, though they arrived there through different mechanical philosophies. The 383 relied on optimized bore-to-stroke ratios and superior breathing capability, while the 400 achieved its numbers through displacement and combustion efficiency. Faced with the realization that both engines could rival or even surpass the performance of many big blocks and do it with better fuel economy, GM found itself in an awkward position. Admitting this would mean acknowledging that their carefully tiered displacement hierarchy was mostly a marketing construct. So they did the opposite. Both engines were held back in different ways. The 383 was never officially acknowledged, making it a kind of underground legend. The 400, on the other hand, was intentionally fitted with restrictive intake manifolds, mild cam profiles, and conservative factory horsepower ratings, often between 175 and 265 horsepower, numbers that masked its true potential. Leaked internal reports from years later showed that when allowed to breathe properly, both the 383 Stroker and the 400 small block could run quarter-mile times in the 12-second range with modest modifications. In some cases, they even outperformed GM's own big blocks while delivering better mileage. But the company wasn't about to let that story get out. They began phasing out certain crankshafts, altering block designs, and limiting the 400's availability to applications like trucks and full-size sedans, vehicles unlikely to be modified for racing. It was a form of corporate self-sabotage, designed to protect existing product lines at the expense of engines that could have redefined performance for a generation. Behind the scenes, GM also discouraged aftermarket companies and racing organizations from unlocking the full capabilities of either engine. Patent controls, supplier agreements, and quiet pressure on industry partners ensured that no one would blow the lid off what these engines could really do. In the end, both the 383 Stroker and the 400 small block became victims of corporate politics, a case study in how a company can suppress its own best ideas to preserve an artificial market structure. And while enthusiasts have long debated which one was truly the king, the real story is that GM created two champions and then kept both off the throne.
Perhaps the most startling revelation came from internal records showing that GM's top executives were privately driving company cars fitted with specially tuned versions of both the 383 Stroker and the 400 small block. These builds were nothing like the watered-down engines sold to the public. Behind closed doors, corporate insiders enjoyed 383 strokers pushing around 450 horsepower and 400 small blocks making roughly 400 horsepower, while publicly insisting that such performance was unrealistic for small displacement engines. In other words, GM was waging a quiet war against its own engineering breakthroughs, intentionally holding back customer innovation and limiting factory capabilities simply to preserve a corporate hierarchy designed to protect profits through artificial product separation. When these engines did manage to escape corporate restrictions and find their way into competitive motorsport, they exposed exactly what GM didn't want enthusiasts to know. On the drag strip, both engines built a reputation for delivering quarter-mile times in the low 12-second range, often with better fuel economy than their big block rivals. The 383 stroker proved it could deliver brutal acceleration without sacrificing daily drivability, while the 400 small block showed an equally impressive balance of speed, torque, and reliability. In the world of circle track racing, the advantages became even clearer. Teams discovered that well-prepared versions of either engine could run with big blocks while offering lighter weight, better handling, and reduced fuel consumption, making them formidable in endurance events. Independent engine builders eventually conducted head-to-head comparisons, applying identical modifications to both engines under the same testing conditions. The results were nearly identical in horsepower and torque output, proving once and for all that each could match the other in performance and that both were more versatile than most big block alternatives. Away from sanctioned racing, street enthusiasts found they could build either engine into a sleeper capable of humiliating high-priced sports cars, all while maintaining the comfort and practicality needed for everyday use. This underground knowledge network quietly chipped away at GM's carefully maintained marketing myths. Today, the collector market has delivered its own verdict on GM's quiet campaign of suppression. Original 400 small blocks, especially well-documented and unmodified examples, can sell for anywhere between $8,000 and $20,000 depending on their condition and provenance. Meanwhile, authentic 383 stroker builds that use original GM components have become equally desirable, celebrated among enthusiasts as the engines that customers perfected on their own, sometimes even outshining GM's official engineering department. Modern engine builders acknowledge both power plants as high points in small block development, and the aftermarket now supports them without the factory-imposed limitations of the past. With today's fuel injection systems, electronic ignition, and advanced tuning software, either engine can easily produce 600-plus horsepower while remaining perfectly streetable, making many big block designs feel outdated and inefficient by comparison. Ironically, much of the technology in GM's modern LS and LT engines borrows heavily from design concepts first explored in the 383 stroker and 400 small block decades earlier. The difference is that now, these principles are openly embraced rather than quietly buried. In the end, the 383 versus 400 debate was never truly about which one was better. The real story is that GM built two engines capable of redefining small block performance and then deliberately kept both from reaching their full potential to preserve a marketing strategy that valued short-term sales over long-term innovation.